Hello, this is the luckiest maths teacher in the world. Today we're having an introduction to trigonometry and we're going to learn how to label sides, but firstly we need to know what trigonometry is. So just like Pythagoras, we're going to use it in right angled triangles. It can be used for many applications outside of right angled triangles. We're just going to stick to right angled triangles. Now, what we do in trigonometry is similar to what we did with Pythagoras' theorem. Now, we use trigonometry to find the length of either an unknown side or an unknown angle in a right-angled triangle. Now, in Pythagoras, we needed to know the other two sides to find what the value of the third side was. But in trigonometry, it's a little different. We can find the length of a side if we know another side and another angle. And unlike Pythagoras' theorem, we can also find angles. So they complement each other. You can use them at different times. So we're going to get into finding unknown sides and finding unknown angles in subsequent lessons. But before we do any of that, we need to be confident with labeling the sides. So when I say label the sides, I'm not talking about just giving them a letter. I'm talking about they have a special name. Now, we've already been introduced to one of them. In every triangle, the longest side is always opposite the right angle in any right-angled triangle, and we call that the hypotenuse, or H, it's abbreviated for. So that isn't new to you. We came across that in Pythagoras' theorem. Now, we have to know how to label the other two sides. So in Pythagoras, it didn't matter how we labeled the shorter two sides. It does matter in trigonometry. So when we're labeling the shorter two sides, it's always referring to an angle. Now, we usually give the angle a Greek letter. So I've called this angle theta. So theta is this angle here. So the way we label the shorter two sides, we label them opposite and adjacent that angle. So the adjacent side is this side here. Adjacent means next to. So the adjacent side to an angle is always next to that angle. Now the other side called opposite, well, you've already come across opposite a little bit because we know that the hypotenuse is opposite the right angle because they're facing each other. So this opposite side is just opposite the angle that we've labeled. So these two are facing each other. The side and the angle facing each other, or in other words, the side not touching the angle we're talking about, that is called the opposite. And we abbreviate it with O, just like we abbreviate adjacent with A. Now, it is important that you understand that it's in reference to an angle. So if I draw another right-angled triangle again, so it's got a right angle, and there are two acute angles. So there was one down here, theta, and there's also another one here, and I'm going to call it alpha. Now I'm going to look at alpha. So if this is the angle that I'm talking about, in maths problems that is like the angle that you're given, you're told the value of, for example, or you're trying to find that angle, then they switch around. The hypotenuse still stays. So the hypotenuse is always the longest side, always opposite the right angle. But in reference to angle alpha, this side down here is now the opposite. It is opposite angle alpha. And this side here is now the adjacent because it is next to angle alpha. So how you label the sides depends on which of the acute angles that you are talking about. So the hypotenuse is the same in every right angle triangle, always opposite the right angle, always the longest side. But the adjacent and opposite, they're the shorter sides, but they switch around depending on which of the acute angles you're talking about. The adjacent is always the side next to the angle, and the opposite is always the side not touching the angle or facing the angle. So please make sure you get this right, because when we come to actually finding sides and angles, we will need to make sure that we've labeled all of these correctly. So that's where we're going to leave it for this lesson. I hope you've enjoyed the video. This has been the luckiest maths teacher in the world. Have a great day.